Representative Kinner.
Excused.
Representative Larson.
Here.
Representative Schwartz.
Here.
Yep, here. Representative Simpson.
Here.
Yay. Representative Stith.
Here.
Representative Walters.
Here.
And Chairman Nicholas.
So members, this is a referral, but if we could, the questions we have, Chairman Olson, is really where the appropriation comes from. I believe it's through a fee based on, given to existing insurance companies. But then we're trying to, as we consider that, we're trying to understand what their responsibility is to fund this sandbox component. So if you could take us through this, the intent of the bill and the interconnection between the two, and then what type of innovation we're trying to glean from this process.
Sure, Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson. So to take on that, let's talk about that appropriation first. That section to $500,000. So over the interim, the commissioner in the insurance department testified numerous times and worked through this bill with us. And at one point, what was very clear from them was that it was going to take some man and woman power to review these applications because they're pretty significant. So there is a revenue source for that in the bill. It's a $5,000 application fee. The hope is that whatever administrative costs they're incurring, that we're trying to offset it down the road in the future with that application fee. The problem is the commissioner and the committee doesn't know if you'll have one applicant or 30 applicants or zero. But if you had 30 applicants, Mr. Chairman, obviously that would overwhelm the commissioner to be able to review all those. So this brought us to the place in the committee where we wanted to have some seed money in this bill so that they could review those applications. Honestly, $500,000 is probably too much. I don't know that they necessarily need that. But they need something. If they have one application, they receive $5,000. I don't know if that offsets their cost. So in discussing that with the commissioner, we simply said, where could we find these funds if we didn't want to use general funds? And of course, the good department told us, well, we could take from the application or the licensing fees pool for legacy insurance. And that is what the bill does. In section 2, I do, Mr. Chairman, and Representative Larson, appreciate that is a policy consideration. From the committee's standpoint, we're not married to where the funds come from. Our concern, Mr. Chairman, was just that the commissioner not be given a mandate to go through applications and not be able to cover the administrative cost of that. The seed money should be paid back by those application fees down the road. I think that's reasonable and that's what the intent is. So if this committee saw that there were a better source of funds, our committee would have no issue with that, Mr. Chairman. And if you saw fit that it didn't even need the appropriation, that would be a policy choice on your side. My fear would be that only the scenario where the commissioner receives 30 applications. I'll be honest with you, I don't think anybody thinks that's going to happen. You know, the commissioners would probably tell you that he's more cynical on whether he'd even receive one application. So that's it with the appropriation, Mr. Chairman. I could answer any questions on that or discuss more on the bill. I know you had multiple things you wanted me to talk about.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you just go to the bottom of page 25, when you say you expected it to be seed money to get things started, I don't think that's the case when it says, starting on line 20, it is the intent of the legislature that this appropriation shall be included in the next budget. Paraphrasing that sentence, that would imply that you would intend to see them requesting $500,000 special revenue every biennium going forward to continue that appropriation.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Walters, I do see what you're talking about. I would say there wasn't a strategic policy choice made on having it as an ongoing appropriation. Again, the intent is that we would love to have hundreds of applications, honestly. And lots of fees flowing into that fund in order to pay for it. If you go back, Mr. Chairman, to, give me a second here. There's a section of the bill that creates the account. And the creation of is it page 15? Yeah, so that's what I'm talking about, Representative Walters, is the idea that we're gonna create, the insurance sandbox account 26-55-105 and allow the administrative expenses. It says on line 6, these funds and any additional funds appropriated by the legislature shall be used only for the purpose of administering this act, including processing of sandbox applications, monitoring, examination, and enforcement activities. So that was the intent. I do appreciate what you're noticing on page 25 under section 2, lines 20 through 22. I don't think it's our intent to have it as an ongoing appropriation. Mr. Chairman, I guess I would add, because we don't know the number of applicants, I'm just trying to recall, maybe that's why the bill is drafted the way it is, that you had to build up applicants. I don't know if that takes 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, however you fund this, I suppose at some point, I know that will come back in front of you in a standard budget request where you can clearly see that it's generating its own revenue and hopefully eliminate that if we don't take care of that before then, which I would not be opposed to.
Mr. Chairman, so Representative Olson, could you give us an example of a type of insurance product that might be offered through this bill that won't exist otherwise, and the administrative burden, if any, that might create on the Department of Insurance? If there are any, what a company might want to do.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Stith, why do I feel like you have many examples?
Well, Mr. Chairman, my favorite example, of course, is the Tontine, right? The life insurance lottery, right? I just don't know if there are a lot of companies that want to offer a life insurance lottery, but it would be a lot of fun if they did. But if we did have an old 18th century style life insurance lottery offered here in Wyoming, I just don't, to me, it seems like the Department of Insurance could handle that in stride and review the application and wouldn't necessarily need any additional money administratively to decide whether that's a good idea or not. But I don't know. I'm not inside the Department of Insurance, so I don't know what their burden is.
In terms of what would come out of this, we don't have there's not a particular, well, I guess I'll give you the genesis, Mr. Chairman, of where it came to us under one. We had already created the 2 previous sandboxes and we're interested. We got a lot of interest in the idea that we were establishing these sandboxes. So initially we sat down and said, are there any other sandboxes we can build? And there was a world at one point interested in called InsurTech. And it's just, so we're not the only sandbox state, Mr. Chairman. There are countries, India, UK, there are many states with insurance sandbox. Usually what the applicants that are interested are usually some type of technology-based insurance bridge that they're providing. Obviously, Mr. Chairman, one example could involve crypto, although that was never discussed in committee meetings. After we decided, hey, this is a sandbox we could probably work on, because this bill actually had been drafted over a year ago. And we didn't study it over the interim. After we got it into the interim, what we attracted was reinsurance, Mr. Co-Chairman or Mr. Chairman. Reinsurance became very interested in the idea that maybe this would be a path to make it more palatable for whatever business operation they were offering. There was another bill that we passed out of the House, and it's already passed through the Senate, that went in and specifically addressed the very specific areas that that company that was interested, it was a Teton company, addressed it in that legislation. So a couple page insurance investments amendments, if you recall, which broadened the scope of what an insurance company can invest in. That's reinsurance. So that bill specifically, I believe, Mr. Chairman, addressed that one company. So we left our interim without, we left without ideas of what we would use this for, because we already solved their problem with that bill.
Insurance companies, other than that, expressing a desire to do this? I mean, and how are people going to learn about it once it's, if it's created?
So, Mr. Chairman, we engaged legacy insurance companies during the interim. We asked, hey, go back and ask your members what they, if there was an interest in this, what they might use it for. And no, legacy insurance companies did not bring forward anything that they thought they would derive from it specifically.
So, so for the other sandboxes we've created, has anything happened with them? Have they been used? Have they moved forward at all? Is there any negative information about it, or is there any positive results yet?
The kind of, so the fintech legislation, really what spun off of that was honestly the special depository institutions legislation. Our speedy banks, our largest and probably most hopefully successful legislation that we've passed out in the blockchain sphere. So it's kind of similar to what happened with the reinsurance, honestly, Mr. Chairman, where this just simply having the bill attracted a player that we were able to work through legislation and address their concerns directly with the insurance department. That's really what happened with fintech too. I'm not aware of anything significant that's come out of that other than the special depositories, but they didn't use that legislation. As you know, we crafted legislation that was more specifically tailored to them. How is it going to be marketed? You know, I think similarly in that sense, I think one of the things the blockchain committee does when it has its meetings is it's really it is a marketing tool for the state of Wyoming, talking about ideas and having participation from all over the world and all over the country. And so I would envision that very similar to the fintech. That's how it would be marketed. It would just simply be, we'd just continue to have our committee meetings on it and continue to talk to the world about it. And hopefully individuals are attracted. Once an applicant does actually apply, Mr. Chairman, everything about what their project is does go up on the insurance. This bill mandates that it goes up on the insurance website for the state of Wyoming. So there is a market.
Changing gears a little bit, what's the balance of the fund that you're taking this from, and what is that money normally used for? You know?
I do not, Mr. Chairman, know the balance of this fund.
I know, that's why I asked the question. Come on up.
Hey, Jeff.
Mr. Chairman, Jeff Rude, the Insurance Commissioner. We're a special fund agency. So what we do is we take our budget, we divide it by the number of insurers that are licensed in our state, and they're sent a bill. It's roughly $2,400 a year. In this case, we were asking for, should the bill go through, an appropriation of the authority to appropriate $500,000. And so that would be built into our assessment. And then if the money was not used, say there were no takers at all in 2 years, we would just assess less next time around. That way we felt that we would have money there for the experts. We actually put together some requests for proposals for innovation, very broad, general type contracts. So we'd have people in place, and the billing, depending upon who you pick and depending upon which innovation you're looking at, it's it's about 200, anywhere up to $500 or $600 an hour. And so we just came up with a figure that we thought would be part of our budget. It would actually increase the assessment on each insurer probably about $100. And then, like I said, if it wasn't used next time through, we just assess them less.
So do you have any feedback from your insurance companies, whether or not this is something that they want to give up $100 for?
Mr. Chairman, not to sound flippant, but for them, this is a rounding error on their 3 martini lunch to do business here. It really isn't. Our domestics aren't going to use this. They're just not. They're going to comply. I've talked with commissioners across the United States about this very topic. We meet probably 3 times a year, and we talk about this sort of innovation, talk about other things. What have other states have seen, West Virginia and a few others, they've seen proposals. They haven't approved any. It turns out that many of these proposals are not innovation per se. They're actually a request to not regulate as heavily in some area. And so you've got to assess it, drill down to that, and then deny the application. And the system is set up where we would hopefully get a phone call first, walk through this, and we could snip out most of those cases where it's just a request to have less regulation versus a true inability because of an innovative product to go forward.
Commissioner Root, help me. What types of innovations are insurance companies looking to create? What are they anxiously wanting to engage in this sandbox environment to where they can get those proved up and stood up? Can you just help us understand what's if that's being driven from the insurance companies themselves, or is this just coming in from, or is there no interest? And then what type of innovations we might be looking at?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, I don't think we've seen so many known insurance companies that are innovating. I think what we're seeing are innovation tech companies getting into or trying to get into the insurance business or the insurance space in some way. So for example, you might initially find somebody's got an app on a phone. They want to have an insurer that when you're in Washington, D.C. and you just happen to jump on one of those scooter bikes, you're covered for some sort of health product or maybe even a casualty product. And so then the states, the various states that look at these companies would have to determine, can they do that with our current regulation, or is that something truly novel? And I think that can be done currently within our structure, but I'd have to drill down further. I think there's some innovation to be had. I don't know if it's an innovation worthy of a waiver of a regulation, because I just haven't seen that yet, and neither have the other commissioners.
So I'm, excuse me, I'm more focused just on the appropriation and the fees and trying to figure out how this will work long-term. So we're doing a $500,000 appropriation from the insurance premium fund, and then we're charging $5,000 per. So that would be 100 innovative applications just to get to that 500. But there's expenditures, cost to that 5,000. How does this play out long-term?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Swartz, I'm not sure because we haven't seen it long-term. We've only seen it in the last 2 years, maybe 3 years from some states. The thought process was we need to have companies available to do assessments, or not to assess, but to assess an application to see if it truly is innovative. If we have the money there, we can at least start down that path. 2 years from now, if this is exploded and we've got a niche market, and we built into the bill, I don't have it in front of me, but we built into the bill the ability to slow roll some of these. If we got hit with, say there was one innovation that actually worked and it was labor intensive and costly and all that, we have the ability to say, all right, you over here, you're gonna have to just wait a bit and work through this. And if we got to that 2-year point and if the money was used up, I would come back and we'd have to say, hey, we've got this. These are the funds. I'll certainly have more data at that point to look at to give a better estimate. But right now, it's just the best we could do with talking to other states and seeing what they've seen.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman. So then the fee is 5,000. Is that just, is that what you charge for other applications that are not innovative, or what's the origin of the fee?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Schwartz, we've seen that from other states. It's not equal to what we see, for example, other insurers. But other insurers too are coming to the table with minimum reserve requirements, the very traditional model of millions and millions of dollars set over here. That isn't necessarily the case here because we don't know what their exposure is. We don't know how many clients they're going to have. And that's where we have to look at something, assess it to see if there will be more, more money in a bond to protect consumers or things like that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If what they pay in Wyoming is a rounding error, essentially, these new type of companies, if that fee were increased from 5,000 to 25,000 or 10,000 or something like that, would that be prohibitive to them even getting into the business, or would it still be considered such a low margin or such a incidental cost of the business that we could increase it to that amount and then they could basically be paying enough to cover the application process and all the work that you have to put into it?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Walters, that was some of the discussions we had when we first started putting this together. Do you have a much higher fee to ensure some sense of viability and respectability on someone coming in first, or not, and keep it low and try to get that innovation in? I think it has to be high enough that no one's going to do it just to see what happens, the $5,000 fee, for example. If we were going to increase that and then, for example, lower my ability, to assess the $500,000, that could happen. Would it prevent some people from coming forward? Perhaps. I just don't know that market yet. I mean, I know there's two kind of players out there. There's those that are truly trying to innovate and get into the insurance space. And I know there's criminals, because I've met with the criminals recently. And I know, and we can identify them fairly quickly, or so we have in the past. And so it's just a balancing act of how we're going to do it. Whether the fee is fair compared to other traditional insurers, that's really a hard one because it's truly apples and oranges. I admit there is a fairness argument that innovation companies are coming in and they're not having to do the reserving and they're not having to do the regulation and they have to do all these other things. And our budget comes from all of the other insurers who have done everything by the book. I acknowledge that. That's just something that I think is a policy decision the body would have to make.
So in the account we're taking from what's the balance of the account?
Mr. Chairman, are we talking about what's the balance in my budget right now?
No. We're
Or is
taking,
in-
the money's coming from 262204, whatever that account.
Representative Source, yes, that's our ability when we do the assessments on the insurance companies.
Mhm.
We have in our 900 series, which is where we contract with experts as needed. We normally have sitting in there $200,000, and it sits there year after year because once a company has trouble and has financial difficulty, they go south in a hurry. We bring experts in right away, and we had to do this with Win Health in the past, where we had to hire individuals to come in and take over the company and liquidate it. That's where the 500,000 would sit in that 900 series. To begin with, right out of the chute, we'd actually probably have to take a little out of that 200,000 budget if one just rolled in day one of passage of this bill.
But the account that the 500,000 is coming from, what's the balance in that account?
Representative Schwartz, it's not a, and
It's
maybe
just
I'm
the
just not saying-
900 series?
It would go into the 900 series. That's just the amount that we would separate out and increase our assessments on insurers.
Got it. Okay.
So I'm signing the letter going to the governor saying our assessments on insurers are going to be, and I think it's $2,450. If this bill is passed, we'd up that next year in accordance and taking into account that $500,000.
So wouldn't it make more sense to raise the fee to 10,000 and then use the fee to And if the 10 people apply, that's $100,000. It makes more sense that the applicants should be paying for it rather than the industry participants, because they're not really interested in paying for someone else's startup costs.
Mr. Chairman, that's a valid point. It is a completely valid point. And we discussed that. And I mean, there was discussions pro and con during the interim with the committee on that matter.
So was it a big, what was the,
Mr. Chairman, I think it comes down to just trying to find the sweet spot on the application. You know, the example that Commissioner is giving of someone on one of these scooters that wants, you know, somebody wants to sell insurance through an app for a 15-minute ride. I think my guess would be that a company at that level, a tech company that's trying to transition into insurance, they don't have a lot of capital. So trying to attract some little ideas like that, that was our discussion on the
if
balance.
they're going to start up a company like that, they're going to have insurance and reinsurance on their whole program. They're going to have money. They're going to have $10,000.
Oh, yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'm not opposed to $10,000. Sorry, I was just saying this is the discussion and why we wanted to keep the balance where it is. The Senate increased this fee. I don't remember what it started at, $500.
So part of what you talked about earlier, you talked about needing to retain an expert or somebody that can assist you in doing this process. So do you envision that at what point where are you going to need to do that? If you have 5 applicants, are you going to need an expert? What are you going to do?
Mr. Chairman, I think it becomes not the number of applicants, but the type of applicant. If it's something, if it is trying to, I'm trying to incorporate something we haven't seen or dealt with before, especially, you know, blockchain technology that we have no expertise in, or maybe even somebody's trying to reinsure Bitcoin, something we have no expertise in. It's not the number of applicants, it's the type of applicant that's going to drive our costs.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman.
Is that chairman or this chairman?
So I get obsessed with things. I apologize. So I'm looking at Fund 104 is in your insurance regulatory fund. And it references the statute 262204, which is referenced to the 500,000. And it says here you got 5.5 million is in the account.
Mr. Chairman, Rivers and Sports, that's my budget for 2 years. My entire budget for the agency for 2 years.
Oh. Okay.
So to put it another way,
I'm going down my rabbit hole and I'm gonna stop.
So you really don't have $500,000 sitting anywhere to do this. You're going to have to raise fees, or you're going to have to move money around in order to, as soon as you need the money.
Mr. Chairman, if one comes in and if it's complex, we will have to take some money out of, I'd referenced that we have some money sitting in the 900 series for when there's, you know, if there were to be a liquidation, we could take some from that. I'm not going to take much because it's there for a reason. And then we, you know, we look at the application, but if something is more complex and exceeds that, we may have to ask for more in the coming year.
So is this something you want to do?
Mr. Chairman, we are neutral on the bill. But we did, I mean, we worked with the committee very hard. I wanted to ensure guardrails for consumer protections, the ability to raise bond or, you know, raise what was needed if there were an increase in people that were going to be covered. And we wanted to know way to jeopardize our accreditation. And I think we came to some pretty good working agreements with that.
Anything else? How long will it take you to review an applicant when it shows up?
Mr. Chairman, again, it's going to be the type. There's some chance we might have some expertise in the office. I'm a little leery of that, but it just depends on the nature of it. And I think we built in the 90 days and the wording is specific of a completed form, because I know we'll get forms and we'll need more information. And so those 90 days won't start ticking until we get all of the information we need to make a comfortable decision.
Okay. Any public comment? Any more public comment? Oh, you're going to speak. Good.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Catherine Wilkinson here today on behalf of American Property and Casualty Insurance Association, standing in opposition to the bill, and I don't know that I can add anything more than has already been shared by the insurance commissioner and the committee's questions in terms of legacy insurance companies paying for innovation. There are proposed amendments that we would suggest that don't address the fee, but that would make it more of a level playing field for legacy insurance companies to be more neutral on this bill.
What happened to your paper?
Mr. Chairman, this was a priority bill and it ended up in the bottom of my briefcase. Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, I don't know if it's the prerogative of this committee to hear those amendments, as it's not really related necessarily to the appropriation. So I'm happy to share that with you.
We'd like to see your amendments.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry I don't have copies for the committee unless you'd like my crumpled one. But it would be on page 4, deleting lines 21 through 23. Page 5, deleting lines 4 through 8. What these sections are the authorization of insurers and general requirements, fees and taxes, assets and liabilities, investments, and administration of assets and deposits are those sections that are listed in the bill. We just feel if those were deleted out of the bill, that it would be a more level playing field.
Just want to make sure so I can refer that. You said on page 4, we delete line 1 through 23.
Mr. Chairman, page 4, delete lines 21 through 23. So it would be deleting, and then page 5, lines 4 through 8. So it would be deleting sections 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6.
Okay, thank you. Please.
So I don't have my green book in front of me. So basically you're deleting specific insurance sections. Can you tell me what they are?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, those sections, section 1 is the authorization of insurers and general requirements. Section 2 is fees and taxes. Section 4 is assets and liabilities. Section 5 is investments. And section 6 is the administration of assets and deposits.
That kind of guts part of the bill.
Mr. Chairman, it does. It creates a more equal playing field for insurance companies.
Mr. Chairman, question for Commissioner Rude. If this 500,000 were cut to 200,000, how much grief would that cause you?
Mr. Chairman, where is Stith? I don't know if it would cause grief. Like I said, I don't know what I don't know, and I just can't. You know, talking with the other insurance commissioners and their, I would hope we could fend off a lot of these if they weren't going to make it without any really technical analysis. It just with a phone call or just with meeting with them and sitting down and looking at it and asking them what you want resolved. If I can't do that, well, then I'm gonna have to dip into that money, and then it becomes a little bit more of a concern.
Okay, close public comment. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, move the bill, excuse me, do pass.
Is there a second? Second. Okay, discussion.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
I'd make an amendment on page 25, starting in line 8. After the word appropriated, I would insert up to. So the line would read, there is appropriated up to $500,000. Special revenue funds generated, and then I would delete in line 10, the statute reference, and insert a new statute reference of 26-55-104. And then, Mr. Chairman, I would go down to line 17, and after the word purpose, I'd put a period, and I would delete the rest of the page.
A second discussion.
Second.
So, Mr. Chairman, for discussion, to understand what I'm doing up on the top is just the up to language, I think makes more sense than a set amount in case they don't bring in a full 500,000. The statutory reference is to allow them to spend money that would come into this account from the fees that are generated through this particular Sandbox bill. And then down on line 17, because we're not using the standard insurance pool, the unexpended funds don't need to go back to the standard insurance pool. And then on line 20, it's the intent of the legislature. I don't think we want to include this in their standard budget just yet. It can come as an exception request at that time. So that's my
And so
thoughts.
Director Root, it seems to me that you could, through either a B11 or some other process, direct part of your funds from the 900 into this account if it's necessary for you to hire an expert.
Mr. Chairman, initially that was going to be the plan if we got these right away and we didn't have enough fees coming into.
So
deal with it.
until we see you next year, and would you be comfortable that you could cover your expenses at?
As much as I can be with the unknowns that we're talking about.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
And so Representative Walters, on this amendment, are you leaving it up to the insurance commission then to determine the amount of the fee?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the fees are set earlier in the bill, and I don't have that page reference off the top of my head. However, that being said, I would encourage the bill sponsor to bring a committee of the whole or a second reading amendment to increase those fees to
10,000.
10 or 15,000
Yeah,
to
Mr.
create
Vice-
more revenue for this account.
Sorry,
We can't-
Mr.
we
Vice
can't
Chairman,
do it
that's
here.
what's that?
So we can't do it here.
No, that's page 11. And I have no problem bringing that amendment.
Well, it'll help put money in the account for him.
Sure.
Oh, yeah, on E.
On the amendment, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the motion carries. Did you get that, Mary Lee? You're so good. Okay, any other amendments? Any desire to move it down to 250,000?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
But Mr. Chairman, I think it's left up. It's just putting a cap on it. It's not a general fund or insurance. It's just what is going to be generated from the applicants. So
Mr. Chairman, following that up, I think if there's anything above 500,000, it'll take based on the language on page 12 or whatever it is. It'll take legislative approval to do anything with anything,
Okay.
any greater funds.
Yeah. True enough.
question.
Question on the bill. Roll call, that's amended. Do pass.
Do pass as amended.
No.
Mr.
Mr.
Kinder,
Chairman, before we go to the roll call, I'd like to take the committee back to page 15 and 16 if we could. I don't know if we can do this in committee, but the 26-55-105 starts there on the bottom of the page 15 and then continues on top of page 16. And just the way that reads, it says that can only be spent based on legislative appropriation. I think what we've done in the back is legislatively appropriate that funding, but I just want to make sure that we don't put money in account, expect them to use the money in the account, and then we have to come back and actually fund it later. So I just want to make sure that they
No, I
can
think
access.
we've appropriated.
Okay, just wanting to confirm that they can access the money we're telling them to access. So, okay, I'm happy then. Thank you.
Back on the roll.
Okay, Representative Kinner did not leave a vote. So Representative Larson.
Aye.
Representative Schwartz. Representative Simpson.
Aye.
Representative Stiff.
Aye.
Representative Walters. Chairman Nicholas.
No,
5 ayes, 1 no vote.